So euphemisms are everywhere. The latest is gender-affirming care. What is that exactly? What is gender-affirming care?
Tell me,
gender-affirming
Tony.
care is the sexual mutilation of children. That's what it is. Here's a specific example. Boston Children's Hospital alone performed 65 double mastectomies on children between 2017 and 2020. Now, these weren't mastectomies for, say, breast cancer. They were not medically necessary. They were in response to trans ideology. That's according to the Journal of Clinical Medicine. So, to be clear, Boston Children's Hospital is not ashamed of committing sexual mutilation of children. They brag about it on YouTube.
Gender-affirming hysterectomy is very similar to most hysterectomies that occur. A hysterectomy itself is the removal of the uterus, the cervix, which is the opening of the uterus, and the fallopian tubes. Some gender-affirming hysterectomies will also include the removal of the ovaries.
A phalloplasty is a procedure to basically create a penis or a phallus for an individual who was born biological female and who seeks transition to a male. We typically utilize tissue from elsewhere. For example, the forearm or the thigh is used.
So that's not the sexual mutilation of children? Well, that's exactly what it is. Why is no one in jail for this? Well, because no one knows it was happening. Then the Twitter account Libs of TikTok drew attention to it, and confronted with the facts, Boston Children's Hospital tried to deny it was even performing these mutilations. In response, the Libs of TikTok is being accused of something called stochastic. That's a phrase you hear all the time. Bubbled up from the academic. If you disagree with them, you're committing violence. It's another attack on freedom of speech. A man called Billboard Chris has been accused of this many times. He travels the country with signs opposing puberty blockers. His real name is Chris Elston. We're happy to have him join us tonight. Chris, thanks so much for coming on. So, why are you doing this?
Well, Tucker, I became aware of this in late 2019 and then throughout 2020. And I'm a dad of girls who are now 10 and 12 years old, so they're right in this age group where all these girls are now identifying as boys. We've seen a 4,000% increase in the last 10 years of girls wanting to transition. And they do this socially in schools. They'll change their name and pronouns. But what I'm really concerned about is the medical abuse going on. We have the biggest child abuse scandal in modern medicine history. These children are being given puberty blockers when they're 10 years old. Then they're given the opposite sex's hormones, which are sterilizing them. And as we've seen in some of these videos, as children now, they are even cutting out their womb or cutting off these boys' penises. The new standards from the World Professional Association for Transgender Health recommend they do these surgeries to 17-year-olds. But as we've seen in California at one of the Kaiser Permanente clinics, they even cut off the breasts of a 12-year-old girl there, and they've castrated 16-year-old boys. So this whole thing is just a giant mess. It's being presented as gender-affirming care, but it's the exact opposite. And I'm out there trying to help children to be who they really are, which is children intact, so that they can grow up and figure out what they want to do as adults. We should not be medically transitioning children.
Well, we shouldn't be sexually mutilating them, that's for sure, or sterilizing them. And I hope that you are bringing attention to the reality of what's happening. We can debate, the trans question, but I don't think there's any debate over whether we should be allowed, which doctors should be allowed to mutilate children. So, Billboard Chris, sure appreciate your coming on tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tucker.
So, why is the sexual mutilation of children, the sterilization of children, legal? No one in the Congress seems to be asking that. No one did until Marjorie Taylor Greene decided this is worth legislating. She represents Georgia in the U.S. Congress. She joins us with an announcement about new legislation pending. Congressman, thanks so much for coming on. So what are you planning to do about this?
Well, I find this absolutely appalling, Tucker. And, the whole reason why I ran for Congress in the first place is because I'm one of the Americans that are sick and tired of our government allowing the abuse of the American people. But when it comes to gender-affirming care, which is really child abuse, this is actually an assault and it's child abuse. And this practice should never happen. It's so disgusting and appalling, and it's an embarrassment to our country. You see, I'm one of those that believes the Republican Party is only worth being a true party, worth deserving of the people's votes, if we are willing to stand up and stop horrific things like child abuse and like so-called gender-affirming care, which is really genital mutilation. It's puberty blockers that cause chemical castration, teenage girls actually having their breasts chopped off, teenage boys being castrated. This needs to be illegal, and I'm introducing a bill called Protect Children's Innocence Act, and it would create a law that would cause it to be a Class C felony for any person involved in so-called gender-affirming care. That means genital mutilation surgery, that means hormones, that means puberty blockers, anything involving any youth under the age of 18, because these kids are too young to make these awful decisions that will affect them and will be permanent for the rest of their lives.
You cut the breasts off a little girl, you should go to prison. Of course, you perform a medically unnecessary hysterectomy on a little girl, you should be in prison. So, I mean, I assume you're going to get every Republican vote for this.
You know, I should have every single Republican co-sponsor, but unfortunately I don't yet. I only have 5 co-sponsors. I'm talking to all of my colleagues and urging them, because Tucker, let me tell you something. This is a referendum on the Republican Party. When we take back the majority, if the American people elect us, we have a lot of work to do. Not only do we need to impeach Merrick Garland, we need to clean out the corrupt FBI, we need to hold the Democrats accountable and defund all of their climate garbage, 87,000 IRS army, but there's one thing that we have got to do, and we're not even a party worth deserving of the American people's votes if we cannot protect children from this horrific child abuse and create this to be a felony. Because this practice has to end. It's the kind of things nightmares are made of, and these are monsters under kids' beds that are doing these horrific things to them.
Yeah. Well, you can't sexually mutilate children. Sorry. And I hope you will send us a list of every Republican who's too cowardly to affirm the obvious. Once again, you can't sexually mutilate children, period. So thank you, Congresswoman, for what you're doing on this. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Tucker.